Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Selena, and I'm a part of the Let's Discuss A Course in Miracles webinar team at the Foundation for Inner Peace. The mission of the Foundation for Inner Peace is to publish, distribute, and discuss A Course in Miracles. And we are holding these Let's Discuss online webinars as an expression of our vision of extending love through A Course in Miracles teachings. Today's webinar is live, and you'll be able to submit your questions into our Q&A feature. We are also happy to announce that simultaneous Spanish translation is available for today's webinar. Attendees can listen to Spanish by selecting the interpretation button in the webinar controls and select for the Spanish channel. For those listening live, we will make sure to paste these instructions in the group chat. Today's Let's Discuss webinar is being brought to you for about the next 90 minutes. Before introducing our guests, I invite you to join in prayer. From the text, chapter 2, A Course in Miracles tells us that we can do much on behalf of our own healing and that of others if we think of our situations in this way. I am only here to be truly helpful. I'm here to represent Him who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to do or what to say, because He who sent me will direct me. I am content to be wherever He wishes, knowing He goes there with me. I will be healed as I let Him teach me to heal. Now, it's time for today's session, entitled Rolling in Laughter's Role in A Course in Miracles. It's likely we've all read or heard of the popular quote from the Course's text, chapter 27, The Healing of the Dream. It says, "Into eternity, where all is one, there crept a tiny mad idea, at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh." So our course discussion today will be just about this, remembering to laugh. Today's session will be for those who are struggling to laugh, for those who love to laugh, and for anyone in between. Our lively group of guest speakers will share their fun with forgiveness, how applied practice of A Course in Miracles helps them to find humor within this world, as well as their thoughts about how the Holy Spirit uses laughter for healing. So without further ado, it's a pleasure to have and welcome our guest panelists today, who are course students, teachers, and fully present to join in the laughter. Foundation President Tam Morgan is joined by Maureen Muldoon, Jodi Murphy, Leon Russell, and Laura Fenamore. Hello and welcome to you all.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Thank you, Selena. I'm going to jump in and start with the reminder that I always hear inside, which is the joke is always on us. We take everything very seriously and can really get into victim mode. And lately we've been saying at the Foundation for Inner Peace, not why is that happening to me, but why is this happening for me? And in that, when we really start to listen, the joke, there is a joke, and it is on us because we've forgotten to laugh. This is a very spirited group today, and I'm going to put in a couple of disclaimers, but really own that if there are people out there who are offended by cursing and language, a lot of these people, part of their humor is a freedom with language. And we live in a time and in a culture that has gotten extremely, I will say my personal opinion, overcorrected in PC, where it's hard for even comedians to joke about things without everyone taking it against their own culture or against their own personal feelings. And we are coming, this group in particular, from the premise that this is a dream. We don't mean to offend anyone in our language or in our anything. This isn't about offending. It's about how we use Course principles to remember the dream, how we use Course principles to remember we are loved. And that's our focus. We always get feedback, a lot of positive, and there's always negative feedback of why did you say this about that? And I didn't like this. And that's fine. It is an opportunity for forgiveness, knowing that our heart is not here to offend. It's just we're going to engage in a spirited, free form discussion, and sometimes that ends up in offense of people not realizing that we are not intending to and to offend. And sometimes in that, your comments help us become more aware. So I'm not saying that, shouldn't comment when something does become offensive, because this is how we live and learn, and we will correct moving forward and respond to that. So that said, welcome everyone. I'm going to start with just an instance of two quick stories of how, for me, the joke is always on me. The first is running this foundation. I never had any intention of running this foundation. And Bob Rosenthal was a board member of the foundation, and he was being asked to step in as president, as my mother, who was president, was trying to step back and looking for succession. And she asked Robert, some people know him as Dr. Bob, if you've heard of him at all, to be president. And I was part of the support team, and he agreed, and he came to me and he said, well, I don't want to do it without you. You know the players. I'd known him since I was 15. He said, you know the people. I will do the work part, the financials, all of the copyright that you can't stand, and, all of this, but I need you for the people, the history in certain ways, and the interpersonal relationships. And I said, no, thank you. I'm a freelance writer. I do this, and that. No, thank you. And he knew me well enough to say, ask. And I said, okay, I'm going to ask, but I'm not going to do this, just so you know. And he said, ask. So I closed my eyes and I asked, am I supposed to be co-president of the Foundation for Inner Peace? Ha ha, no, thank you. And I got shown a panoply of different times and places in my life where I was put in a situation in my mother's course world at exactly the time where something big happened. Like I answered the phone when no one was doing translations to Rosa Maria and said, why aren't we doing translations? Talk to my mother, when Bob Scotch wouldn't let her. And thus the first translation came. Many different things in my life where I was put in a certain place and suddenly noticed it all at that moment. And then I heard very deeply, gotcha. And my response, I'm not very good with the kindness that so many people in reverence and awe of Holy Spirit, although we're not supposed to use awe. But my inner ego response was really, and don't look at the screen if you don't like this kind of language, this, thank you, Holy Spirit, no, thank you. But I always do what I hear in the voice that I recognize separate from me. And I made bargains that I'm not supposed to make. Okay, but it has to be fun, and I can't be like my mother, and like I'll never fill those shoes. And I was told, of course, you be yourself. Of course, this is going to be this. So I opened my eyes, and Bob Rosenthal was reaching out his hand. That's how confident he was about what I was going to hear. And the moment I touched his hand, I knew this deeply, profoundly was supposed to be. And then a couple of years later, he proceeded to get a brain tumor and, pass on, die, transition. And the joke was really on me because suddenly I was doing the financials. He promised I didn't have to do the copyright. So it's how I used course principles to not be resentful, which I'm still doing, and to say, this is a funny joke, but it's what I'm supposed to be doing. And much of the time, but I will say not all the time, always, I really take it as that. And I keep remembering this was a joke and this was supposed to be. So that's what I'm talking kind of about, the joke. The next thing I'll say, and then I will move it to our panelists, because I'm sure they have many stories, is I had a son who was 3 years old, actually. And I always wondered how he would embarrass me, because I worked with a lot of children and they never embarrassed me. I could be in an elevator and the child would say, oh, that man farted and he also has a mole on his face and blah, 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 going down 20 floors, not embarrassed. But I had my son, we're in a grocery store and he wanted everything, of course. And the 99th thing he got, and then the 100th thing, I just said, no, I'm exaggerating, of course, but I reached my limit and I said no. And he got really upset. We're right at the checkout line. And he goes, I really want this. It's like, no, enough is enough. And then out of nowhere, right in the checkout line, my son started to yell, go ahead and hit me, you like to. I'd never touched him except lovingly in my life. And I looked at him and I said, what are you talking about? You know I don't hit you. And like all these people are now looking at me. And usually moms, especially at the grocery store, they feel for you when your kid is having, a tantrum, but not in this kind of case. And so he starts going, yeah, like this. And he starts to hit himself. He got me. He totally got me, but I was not laughing. And I was furious. And I was like, honey, that's not true. And everyone's looking at me like I'm wondering who's going to be calling Child Protective Services. And I get him, I navigate, I hold it together, and I get in the car and I put him in his car seat, turned around and said, why did you say that? Where did you hear that? And he just looked at me and said, I made it up. And I'm like, what context did you have to make it up? But I heard again, the gotcha, mommy. And where it got me in sync with the course is this never happened. And when I realized not only did it never happen in what I called real life, this never happened. The joke is on me. I set it up. I wondered how he could ever embarrass me. And he got it. He got me. And so the laughter that finally came from that moment was my healing with him. And he was laughing. He thought it was so funny. And, we talked about, please don't do that again. It's a little dangerous in this world, and all the other responsible things one should do as a parent in that situation. But that's what I mean by the joke always seems to be on me. Now, I'd love to turn it over to the panelists. Anyone want to jump in with one of their favorite funny forgiveness stories?
Well, I'll jump in since you brought up Dr. Bob and your mom. And I want to say that when I first started the course in the late 80s, I reached out to Jodi. She invited me over. And one of my first jobs was to be in the garage and go through Helen and Bill's stuff, which was amazing. But I just want to say back to the laughs on Tam, because I remember when I first met Tam, she looked at me in the garage and she said, Laura, when she goes, I'm lighting a match. And it was a joke at the time, kind of, sort of, but it was, I'll never forget that. And like, clearly that didn't happen. But when I started working for the foundation 5 years ago, and here I am, a jokester. However, I was so determined to be as professional as possible and felt very, very, very intimidated by Dr. Bob. I loved him dearly. And when I was invited to host webinars. And one of the webinars with him and Tam and Jodi, I was scared to death. And I was like, okay, you can do this, Laura. And I was petrified, absolutely petrified. And when you get petrified, you make more and more mistakes. So right out of the gate, I screw up his name. I called him Dr. Rosenbaum. And I actually had one of our volunteers change it and like mic me over. But I walked away as soon as I could turn my camera off and walked into the kitchen and just started swearing at the top of my lungs. Like, I'm not going to say what I said, but I was like, okay. And then I had to walk back over to my computer and be very peaceful. I'm like, okay, the next question. Well, needless to say, I'm not the hostess anymore. Got fired from that job, but I'm still here, thank God. And one of the things that,
from that job, 1 second, that's not what happened.
well, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's
Mhm.
Selena is perfect for it, and whoever else. But I just want to say that Judy used to say to me all the time, if you're laughing, you're not in fear. And I'm like, that is one of my mantras. If I'm laughing, I'm not afraid. So thank you. So who's up next?
Wait, before who's up next, I just want to say that the reason that Laura was ushered out of that job, and really not by any human, but just by what happened with Selena coming, was because she was taking it too seriously. Literally, it became, she got nervous all the time about it instead of just being comfortable about what would happen. So it just said, you go over here and let's see if you'll take that job seriously. Landed on a couple that she didn't take in the same way, and she's perfect with it. So
Thanks, Tam.
which is different than not being respectful. You know, take something not seriously and be incredibly respectful. So,
Well, I
look,
got a story.
your pictures there. Okay, go for it, Jodi.
I got a story. Okay, so here's the thing. First of all, I've been in the course for maybe 5 years. When I heard happiness was my only function here, I was like, sign me up. This is something that I am very good at. So I enjoy myself over all the things that I should feel ashamed over. But I got to tell you, the biggest comic in the world is God, because the divine timing, you can't make this, you know what, up. Let me give you an example. Okay, pre-course, I had managed to run my life into a ditch because I was doing it myself. I didn't need a God. I didn't need anyone. We all know the drill. Well, my children saw the difference in me. I was on prescription drugs and also every other thing I could get my hands on. Okay, it was not on a good course. So my girls laid down the law and they said, Mom, if you don't go to rehab, you know, we're not talking to you. Well, I thought I could maneuver. No, they didn't answer my calls for like 6 weeks. I was a basket case, started into a rehab program. I know, isn't this thrilling? And I'm getting weaned off all my medicine and my body starts to go through withdrawal. So I have to go to the hospital. Okay, now I'm a nublet at this point, right? I don't know what anything's for. I got to go into the emergency room. I pack my bag. Okay. I packed a little bag to go to like Club Meth or something. You know, I'm thinking I got to go and detox. And I call my daughter in the emergency room and she answers. After 6 weeks, she answers. I tell her where I was. She gets all nervous. I get all nervous. And she said, you need to go to rehab. And I said, if it means that much to you, I will go. By this time I had already sober, but they wanted it done their way. I wanted it done my way. Well, guess who won? They did. And guess how it happened? God, he's such a funny God, right? So I just proclaim to my daughter, if this is what it's going to take to get my family back, I will go. The noise that came out of her mouth was not human. And I knew, you know, my world was about to change. Right when I made that commitment to her, the doctor flings over the curtain and I was like, Ellie, I got to call you back. Hang up. He goes, good news. Your labs all look good. Your blood work looks good. You're doing all the right things. We don't even need to keep you overnight. Keep up the good work. You can go. And I was like, I just committed. I wheeled my little bag out of Club Meth. And I looked up at the moon and I went, you're a funny God, because there's no other way. The timing was so exquisite. Mwah! And 2 days later, I'm driving my ass up to Betty Ford to do it the way my kids wanted to. So, I mean, I was so proud. I had it all figured out, but I just was picturing God up there, like sitting next to the moon going, gotcha. How you like them apples, Jodi? So, yeah.
I would add to that. Guess what? You are that funny God. It is you doing that to yourself through the love of your children, where you are connecting. It is the love that brought you to your higher self message, or deeper self, however you want to look at it. And you are the funny God. And that's what we're cursing at. And that's what we're fighting all the time, instead of, yeah, I am funny with myself. I do have a funny narration here. Thanks to God for correcting us and bringing us to the Course. And that's what the Course keeps showing us over and over again. It's not something separate. It's not something above and up there laughing at us. It's that part in ourselves that knows what's really best for us.
Yeah. And just so
Congratulations.
well played.
Yeah.
So well played
Yeah.
that it was just like, I surrender because that was so good. I'm going. That was so well done. So, yeah. And then one more quick story, another God story about rehab. Good times, people. Don't do as I say, or do, or did. Anyway, so now I am at, Betty Ford, proud to say it, Town Karen member. I am walking, and at this point, I took a walk after lunch, and I said, you know what, God, I completely and totally surrender. However long it's going to be, I'm not even going to ask how long they're keeping me here. Whatever needs to happen, I'm in. I'm freaking in. And I could literally almost feel my pain physically moving. 6 hours later, I'm in my car heading back home from rehab. 6 hours when I'm like, hey, I'll move in, I'll build a wing, whatever I need to do. 6 hours later, I'm in the car. I'm driving away from rehab, like, what the hell is here? And it was almost like God's like, all right, I sense you're sincere. You can go now. Bye-bye.
Well, that's it. First of all, Tam's completely right. Like, you think God has good timing, but it's you that has really good timing, Jodi Murphy. You have great timing, and I've always acknowledged it. And the thing is that, like, we make plans, God laughs. God makes plans, we laugh. Because God's plan is gonna be the one that lights us up. And if you didn't go through that dark night of the soul, look at everything that's happened since you got sober. Your life has just actually become purposeful and helpful. When we say I'm only here to be truly helpful, it's God's like, okay, really? Well, then I'm going to get you to where you need to be so that you can actually be truly helpful. But I just, story of you in rehab making all of these plans, and gosh, we've done so many of those, on the bathroom floor, fetal position, this is the last time, I swear. I love the Course in Miracles take on humor, because it brings us into this whole new language, and my husband has been learning languages for a long time, and he's told me, and I love that we have Veronica doing the Spanish speaking, because he said, I know that when I grasp a language, I know that I've grasped it because I get the humor of it. And so I really believe that when you continue to study A Course in Miracles, it starts to get really funny. It starts to get funny, like those stories that you've just told. And for me, the story that kind of woke me up was pretty much like your story, Tam. Actually, I was going to do A Course in Miracles online with a group of people for 21 days. And I was like, I'm going to do this for 21 days. That's it. And then as soon as it was done, people were like, let's go to the distance. And just like you, I was like, I am not getting up every morning at 6:45 in the morning. And the Holy Spirit gave me sort of the same gotcha thing. It was like, I said, am I supposed to do this? And the answer was, do you have better plans? And I was like, shit. Should have made better plans. But here's the thing, just like you in regards to your title, and just like me in regards to the role that I'm playing, I actually love doing this. Why do we fight what we love? I actually love doing what I do. When we're in the plan of God, it actually includes us. So it's a very happy plan. And so I'm learning how not to wrestle with God.
Yeah,
I'm learning that he wins.
it's
Pretty much every time.
I'm done being pinned.
My money's on him.
Yeah. I think that's a good bet. There was something that you said that was also funny for me, because we put all of these funds into doing the web edition. And I was very pleased with our search engine. I mean, it was like we finally had a search engine that you could actually put in a word and it would come up, and it was great. And right out the bat, I was showing it to someone and they said, well, like what? And I said, well, we'll pick a word, like, and they said, like what? I said, well, like surrender. Let's see how many times it shows up in the course. So I put in surrender and it doesn't show up at all. And it's like, oh no, it's broken already. I can't believe this. Did it again. No surrender. Well, it ends up surrender is not in the course at all. And what is instead of the place of surrender is release, letting go. Those are the words that take that place, because surrender kind of implies, I call it like the Wizard of Oz, surrender Dorothy to some greater something that's dominating you. And instead, it's a free will letting go. Okay, I'm willing now. And the Course says all you need is a little bit of willingness, and angels rush in to help. So it's like, okay, I'm willing to let go now. And so it was just very funny how just choosing of all words, that word that wasn't even in the Course showed me, look at the difference. Look at the difference. So it's also the humor to teach us how we see things and how we use words. So
yeah, I think it's just, the universe is a funny place. And then, and still to this day, I mean, because everything goes on in our own minds. Nothing happens outside of ourselves, right? So when I'm at a 12-step meeting, I have visions. Okay, so maybe I did do a little damage that stuck with me over the past years. But when I go to rehab, I mean, when I go to AA, I picture my angels up there smoking and drinking in the room, like having a good time going, hey, how you doing, Joan? Staying on course? Love it. Love it.
That's very funny. You know, when I used to do Course in Miracles groups, 12-step groups, and writers groups in my home, my husband would come in and he would say, I can tell when you have Course in Miracles groups here. And I'd say, how? And he'd say, because there's a lot more laughter. Like, wow, that's pretty impressive, because there's a lot of laughter in 12-step groups too. but to, you know, and I like to say, like, if there's not laughter in your group that you're studying, get to another group. Like, get to the place where people are like infusing it with humor, because it's so dense. And I think that when you apply your, you know, ridiculous lives to, when I apply my ridiculous lives to the concepts, it does get really funny. It does get really hopeful and funny and applicable. You know, when comedians, the reason they're funny is because they're just speaking the truth. You know, they're just saying what everybody else has been thinking. And that's what makes it funny. And we get to do that together. Like, we get to speak the truth together and recognize how ridiculous this whole thing is.
now I want to hear from you for sure, Leon, but I have to insert this, excuse me for one moment. I've said this before. I don't know if any of you have heard this, but I love this. Do you know what the common denominator throughout the world is in laughter?
Everybody pees their pants.
That's a good one. No, not everybody pees their pants.
No, they will. They will.
After the laughter, everyone who laughs, there is a sigh, and the sigh, like it's, and that's the aha moment. It's the release, and that's the moment of present, being fully present, is in that brief moment of
beautiful.
Yeah. So come on, Leon, give us.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about the universality of laughter and how it speaks to everybody. And I don't know if you guys know, but there's other countries in the world apart from England. And there's a country across the Atlantic Ocean called America. And in the late 60s, there was a concert called Woodstock. I didn't realize this was going to be history and geography and everything for you guys as well. So I'll just sort of speed that bit up. Crosby, Stills and Nash, a trio, beautiful musicians played there. And one of their lyrics has always just done it for me. He goes, if you smile at me, I will understand, because that is something everybody everywhere does in the same language. I'm just like,
well,
Well, he is a rock star.
I will say that is so beautiful. And I am notorious for getting lyrics wrong. And
Mhm.
I always thought those
Here we go.
until this moment was in the same land. I didn't know it was in the same language.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I
But it
think
still works.
nailed it.
It still works.
And I think the thing that's really cracking me up at the moment with the course, and I'd recommend this as a daily task for people because it's been going on for me for a while. And I'm thinking about like how you can use a symbol, as we know, symbols of symbols with words with the course, and your name. So Leon, if somebody imbues that word with a whole spectrum of emotion from the fear voice through to the love voice, you could say Leon, 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 and it's got this scale of where all you're doing is saying the same word with the different emotions. And I'm looking at the course recently where Jesus says you're not special, and I'm trying to look in this spectrum of like, at which point can you envisage yourself, because this has come from just pure kindness. Someone's looking you in the eyes and going, you're not special. And, you know, trying to find that little place in the spectrum where I can envisage myself looking at someone and being really kind in my intent and saying, you're not special, you know. And then I was listening to Ken like a couple of days ago, and he was going, another word for special is separate. And then all of a sudden it's like you could, you know, just to then envisage yourself saying you're not separate. It's so easy to access that kindness in an instant. But in fact, like, that's been my thing of laughter for at least a week now, of like trying to work out how you say to somebody you're not special from a place of just pure kindness.
Yeah.
When I hear it, there's always a little humble, oops. Yeah, I forgot. Oops. Oh God. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes I hear the Holy Spirit say, when I think I have things to do, I hear the Holy Spirit say, you're not that important. That always makes me laugh. I'm like, oh, thank you. I feel good about that.
It's a healthy leveler.
Yeah, you're not that important. I'm like, great, good to know.
Well,
Another way to, what I heard today was that, you know, to get away from being separate is doing a spiritual practice makes you extraordinary. Like you want to be so ordinary that you're not better than anybody else. And it's a different twist on the word extraordinary, to be extraordinary and just not place a hierarchy on anybody or anything. And I don't know, I thought that was
Jodi,
interesting.
It's really funny that you say that, because I went back east for a memorial service burial of both my mother and my stepfather, Witz, who was a graduate of West Point Academy in the military, to their inurnment where we were burying their urns in the ground. And there was a chaplain who got up and was talking about all the different myriad of things that they did. And the list was getting funnier and funnier, especially for my stepfather, because he did so many different things. And he started at, even when he was a student at West Point, for the multiple things. And he, you know, most people are in 1 or 2 clubs, and Whit was truly in like 20 clubs. And we were laughing so hard. And how he summed it up, which was so beautiful, it was, he said, and the people that they knew and that they talked to, these were the most extraordinary people who knew how to appear as ordinary, so that they were accessible, that you could relate to them. And because they knew they weren't exceptional, they were ordinary and extraordinary. And that's, you know, with the specialness, yes, we're all coming and representing an aspect in this world of form that is unique, that makes us in one way special, we're in and separate. But when we get to the truth, we're all one, and we're all the same reflection that then we project out. So it's another one of those little tricky course principles that you unravel to get to the truth.
and
Right.
I'm I was going to say, I'm the schmuck here who has to deal with the
That's a bad
pain
word.
and shame. What?
It's a bad word.
We don't say
Uh-oh,
bad words
sorry.
here. We don't say bad words.
Sorry. I mean, one of my absolute forgiveness opportunities in practicing the course is just trying to push specialness on people that are like, no, don't make me special. And that was your mother. I mean,
And me. You did
and
it to me.
I was going to say, and you, and everybody associated with this. And it's like, stop. And I just, oh God, I tell stories about how I would, go over to Judy's house and be like, you need to be on a stage. And then I'd like walk away and feel like this big, but also I'm like, but I'm right. I know I'm right. And poor Judy, oh my God, she loved me anyway, in spite of my pushing, trying to get her out and up on a stage. It's like, Ken's the teacher. I don't need that, Laura. And I'd be like, but why not? God. Oh my
Sometimes it's because we're projecting onto someone else what, like, maybe you need to be on a stage, Laura. So, I mean, sometimes all I know is that when I was going around before I did my one-person show, I was like, you need to do one-person show. You need to do one-person show. You need to do. And then I was like, why am I telling everybody that? And I was like, maybe I need to do that. And so maybe you need to be on stage, and I would be the one in the front seat if you did that. But it's like sometimes.
Let's go, Laura. Come on,
Let's do it.
Reflect the nerve back.
God.
Well, that's
my God, we're having a Laura intervention right now.
Yeah, really. But I will have to say, that said, my mother was the one who started these webinars, and then my mother was the one who started the podcast. And so you weren't wrong, Laura. It's just the way you were making it about her ego to her. That's what she was hearing versus what her purpose was telling her she needed to do. And she loved when she thought of the podcast, because she didn't have to get all made up and have her hair done before, podcast. She could just, sit looking however she looked.
And she joyfully showed up for every symphony call, which is what we, a call that we do every week for staff and volunteers at the foundation. Yeah. And she showed up till the 3 days before she passed.
She gave up caring what she looked like for that. Yeah, she would come in her robe and just put a scarf around her neck. That was very funny. So it wasn't, there's no wrong here. And I even want to comment that it's, even though I personally agree, Maureen, with, if you're in a group that's not fun or laughter, change groups. But I have so seen different flavors of people. And they're I call them the Woody Allen groups, where people were like so obsessed with death and their own ego and what happens when it's going. But they are practicing the course, and they'll talk to each other. And it's not a group for me, except if I want to laugh at them, sort of with them. But they get something out of it. They still get something out of this deep intellectual pursuit of the density of the course that is just not my natural inclination. And their laughter is of a different flavor. And I respect that.
Yeah. And I don't think you're sacrificing one for the other. I think you can go deep and joyful. Yeah. Like I do feel like you can go deep and joyful. And I do also feel like we're going to experience pain here, but pain plus time, according to the comedians, is humor. Pain plus time is humor. So since there's no time here, we should be laughing all of the time, those, pain is just, pay attention inward now, or it's just a call for love. And as quickly as we can get to the reinterpretation, that's where we get to, condense time. And I actually love those deep thinker Woody Allen types a lot.
Yeah. But that does bring me to a point that I know people wanted us to talk about a bit in this webinar, which is one of our questions, which is, how do we find humor amidst fear and perceived atrocities? And are we not being compassionate? If someone comes and said, I just lost my child, and we're sitting there laughing, going, this isn't real and this is a joke, that's not quite what is being spoken about in this course. And it's called mixing levels. Or spiritual override, which is dealing with this. How would you each respond to that? Like, what have you how have you approached a situation that's really horrible, and found your own perspective of humor within?
Well, you know, I think laughter and humor are not necessarily the same in regards to how we can navigate it spiritually. I think laughter is what? It's a wordless sound of joy. So we're here to be happy. It doesn't mean we're going to be laughing our way through life. It just means that we have that. And I really do believe that laughter and that happiness is like lives on the foundation of peace. That first we get to experience peace. And then from that, happiness is just like that joyful, visitor that comes after we established some peace. But in regards to a specific story, I had a friend of mine back in California who had twins, and one of them had cancer, and she lost one of her children. And every year she had to celebrate her child's birthday. And I was teaching A Course in Miracles, and I was talking about how a happy outcome is guaranteed. And it seems like an extravagant guarantee. And I remember some of the students were like, how is that even possible, that a happy outcome? They're like, look at this woman. Is her life happy? And funny enough, when we really sat and looked at her life, she had taken this pain, it had alchemized and transformed into her dedication to the school that her child went to. And she created this incredible science wing. And she was actually one of the happiest people I knew at that point. Now, didn't always look like that. I went on hikes with her where she literally looked up at the heavens and said, F you, God. And I was like, oh, I'm not with her. But but we move through that. And I think we get to have patience for ourselves and each other as we move through the process, but to know that a happy outcome is guaranteed. Like when my dad died, it was horrific. I felt like I didn't have any reason to breathe anymore. And so in that moment, after teaching A Course in Miracles for many years, I was like, well, I'll be damned if I'm not blessed by this. I didn't believe those words at the time, but I committed to those words. I will be damned if I'm not blessed by this. And I had to get my ass out of bed and go take care of some kids that, I was directing in this play. And it was a bit of The Walking Dead for a little while, but we do find our way through those things. And those classrooms give us great compassion. So it's not all about just like, it's just fun. I mean, we do get to go deep with this.
And the fact is, you said absolute truth, because Maureen, you would have been damned if you didn't.
Exactly. That's why I love that phrase. I am not here to damn myself.
Yeah.
So I went to my best friend's mum's funeral a little while ago, and I'm also a professionally trained celebrant. So he knew he wasn't going to be able to speak on behalf of his mum during the service. And he asked me to read out what he'd written for her. And I did it professionally. There was a few wobbly moments because there was so much emotional investment in what I was reading. And, it was a very interesting experience in terms of what I was feeling inside myself, what I could see in everybody else. There was no time to stop everyone from crying and say, excuse me, nothing real's threatened, nothing unreal exists. You have to sort of realize the metaphysics is held in your mind, and on behalf of everybody there, you're staying connected to that truth, if you like, of emotion and the reality of the situation, whilst letting everybody be a human being and have a human experience, and kind of in a sense of the miracle, knowing it's going to collapse space and time, and there is no linear time. Once the experience has faded and people are processing it, then it's obviously going to be presented to them in a different way. And I was looking at the one of the pamphlets the other day, the psychotherapy one. It says, one wholly egoless therapist could heal the world without a word, merely by being there. No one needs see him or talk to him or even know of his existence. His simple presence is enough to heal. So that really spoke to me, sort of put a context on what I'd been through and the rawness of what these people are like, my family, and I've known them for half of my life. My best friend's a 6'3" Glaswegian from Scotland who's just like a man mountain, and to see him sobbing his heart out, after the service, we went outside, and his little 6 or 7-year-old daughter came up to him, and she just said to him, "Don't cry, Daddy. Souls don't die, and they never leave us." And then turned on her heel and just went and ran off and went and did some playing. I was like, mic drop. There you go. Child's perspective.
That's so beautiful. What is, I love that term, a professionally trained celebrant. What, like, what does that
Like a
actually
minister?
mean? I want to be that. What is that?
So there's no legislated kind of qualification. So you tend to get trained by other professionals so that you can do the job of leading services of either weddings, baby naming, gender reassignment, funeral. But you've had professional training so that you don't stumble when you're there. And you, but like I said, in the context of that being someone I was completely emotionally involved with, it's not the same as feeling the sentiment, delivering it with care and a rhythm of speech and engaging with everybody. It was equally a few moments where I had to like, oh God, because it was so powerful what he'd written, and I knew his mum for half my life, and her body was a few feet away and everybody was in tears. So it was a really interesting classroom to experience.
Well, sometimes too, I mean, people need to see that from you if you're doing a service like that in order to know that you're not above and that you're connected to that, very much so. And the joke is on me, because when you just defined it, I am that. I do that. So what a surprise. I was at I was asked to be at the last minute. It was during COVID, and I had someone who was like a godson to me. My best friend's son had passed away, and I was asked because the person coming to do the ceremony couldn't get out because of COVID. So the day before, I was asked, "Can you do this service for us?" And it's like, I was already choked up. It was a death that was a drug overdose, and really sad by it. And really love this person dearly. So the next day I'm doing this service outside in a place where there's a little hedge around where we were sitting. And out of nowhere, a car comes careening off the highway in through the hedge, goes up a tree, and the group that was there to hear this, half of it was like one of those horror movies where one half the side jumped up screaming and ran. The car almost hit this boy who passed away. His 2 younger siblings just missed them really by inches. The car went partway up a tree, hit a water main on the way that was bursting, and then 3 kids scrambled out of the car. The first kid, who was the driver, with a 6-pack, and took off and ran. The next kid threw some clutches out of the car, and he was down and he was stuck because he couldn't run. So his friend, who came third, stayed with him. And the police came, and the police was screaming, and I had to bring the crowd back together for the rest of the service after we were questioned by the police and everything else. And it was like, this is incredible. How do I bring this back? And I suddenly touched in with the boy, this young man who passed away, and I heard myself say, first, I always did. So we're all professionally trained if we do the course. If you say the prayer, "I'm here only to be truly helpful," we hand that away. That is our professional training if we hand it over to spirit. And I connected with this being and heard myself say to everyone, like, "Come sit back. It's not going to happen again. You're safe. You're safe." Like, once the water was turned off. And I said, wouldn't Jack, was his name, wouldn't Jack love this service being yelled at over the police? That's who he was. That was his spirit. And everyone started laughing. Like, yes, Jack weirdly would have loved this because he was such a rebel, and that's how he went out. And he was an amazingly kind being as well. But touching into the humor at that moment where it was pretty devastating, it broke everyone, but it brought everyone back together. And it brought everyone back together. But I mean, it was just what was needed to bring the memory of this person without condemnation, but celebrating. He was a rebel. This is who this kid was. He went out very with a deliberate decision to go out in a certain way, even though it was an accidental overdose. He chose the path. That's what he wanted to be doing. So
That's
anyway.
so beautiful, because, you know, I think the opportunities to bring levity and joy or humor to a moment requires us to really listen to the moment, past the fear, past what you think is right or wrong. You know, I mean, you've done that. Now you could do anything. I mean, that is a really insane service you just went through.
What I didn't say was at the exact same moment, the day before, my mother told me that she was ready to go, that she was going to be leaving. And I said to her, can you wait till Sunday? Because I just found, this was Friday. Can you wait till Sunday? Because I just found out I have to officiate this service for Jack, who she loved tremendously. And she said, I'll try. And it ended up, she was in the middle of a massive heart attack and I didn't realize it. And when the water broke, I heard, oh, my mother's water just broke, or the opposite, not for birth, but for her transition. And I went straight from Jack's service to be with my mother as she ended up departing. So it was all touching each other, but there was this, came back to my mother saying, thank you for waiting. And your water broke. I know you're for real, because there were a lot of times she thought she was going to go and she didn't. She was in the hospice for, well over a year. So there was humor even amidst the challenge of it. There was no darkness in it, actually. It was just challenge.
That is an unbelievable story.
Oh, I'm sorry. What, Leah?
Hollywood would have appreciated that. That would have taken some coordinating.
Yeah, there was a lot more than just those two things. It was like a confluence of many, many. Bob Rosenthal's mother ended up dying the day after my mother, and I was there with her. It was a crazy, crazy time.
And, sobriety is coming up, like people are reacting to Jodi's story and people that are like myself that are sober in this group. The irony of that was the people in the car were drinking.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were drunk. They were drunk.
Yes.
Yeah.
People that almost killed people at the funeral or at the memorial.
That wasn't funny.
That was not funny.
That was dealt with very
not funny
through the police. But
it's nice that they took their 6-pack with them, because you gotta, put on your own oxygen mask first. Priorities. One thing I would like to talk about, though, is in keeping with how low my life had gone. And, when you're not living your best life, you can look back and be like, oh, Madonna, me, I can't believe I did that. I said that, whatever. But when I'm made aware, because I'm present, and when I'm made aware of something that I did wrong, instead of harming myself with that information, I think it's freaking hysterical. It's like, wait, I did that. Oh my God, ridiculous. And, it allows you to not use that memory to harm yourself again. And laughter eradicates. Forgiveness and laughter work together. If you don't forgive yourself, you can't laugh at yourself. If you're like, hey, I know better now.
Yeah.
It just, to take an action and rewound yourself over and over again is like the most painful thing in the world. Instead, you're just like, oh, what a stu-nut I was. Okay, well, note to self, don't do that. And, move on. It's
also
just
in that there's I have a friend who was going through a horrible year and she kept doing awful things, and I had just met her that year and she kept saying, this is so not me. This is so not me. And I was going to get a t-shirt that said this is so not me. But that comment is really beautiful because you acknowledge this bad behavior. I'm not in my right mind. This is so not me. So it would be lovely if you take accountability for bad behavior that is going on with you, instead of going, this isn't me. And so, I don't care and I'm forgiving myself, but really I'm out of control right now. How do I shift to what really is me? How do I come back to this position of love instead of punishing myself for the time that wasn't?
Yeah, I think there's the steps of recognizing, well, first of all, it takes so much self-love to get sober. And then we can sort of have the malachi crunch of like blaming or shaming ourselves, which can keep us drunk because blame and shame is like intoxicating. But guilt has no sense of humor, has no humor. And it's like, okay, that happened. I'm going to change. I've changed my mind. I'm going to move forward in the direction of a more helpful, channel. And I forgive myself for those things. And then I can go about making amends to other people. If I go to those other people with that guilt and that shame, it's just going to continue to fracture. So, like, I think that, I think that's why sometimes in 12-step meetings, there can be a lot of laughter because we're like, you did what? It's like, oh my God. And just kind of like the story that you just told, Tam, like there is like, it's incredible what we get back up from, you know what I mean? Like we get back up from a lot of crazy stuff, but yeah, I do agree. Like there is that reverence of saying like, it's funny, but it's also not who I am. It's not who I actually am.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
to regroup, Laura, I think, this is perfect time for you to talk about your eyes, your teeth, your, when a story gets very, when you're in pain, when you're suffering and you're in pain, it is hard to separate and express laughter in it. And I know for me, my mother was, leaving, transitioning, and she insisted that we call our German publisher because she wanted me to meet him, and she's having a heart attack and she's screaming. And she said, okay, just you have to talk to him. And this is her last day of life. She's still working. And she said, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to be screaming, so mute me. And then when I touch you, unmute me. And so she's screaming, and then he's talking or I'm talking. And then she touches me and then she says, well, Heinz, I have to say, blah, 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 blah. And she goes back to screaming. And, when I mute her, and we were both, I was laughing. And even though she was screaming, there was a laughter within how absurd it all was. And Laura, you go for it.
Yeah, well, where do I begin? As much as I laugh, I cry. Laughter is my medicine. It's my healer. And other healers for me are praying and giving everything to the Holy Spirit when I can remember to do that. I have been, I think, intuitively trained to believe that there is a bow and a present at the end of all conflict. And that's what the Course tells us. It promises us that. Course also does not tell us that we can't feel. And so I have to feel. And this quote that I love is, the world will end in laughter because it is a place of tears. Where there is laughter, who can longer weep? And only complete forgiveness brings all this to bless the world. So I have to forgive myself for forgetting to laugh, because when I was in dire pain and nearly lost my sight last October, I couldn't laugh. I mean, the only thing actually I could laugh about, to be honest, was everybody trying to psychoanalyze why this happened to me. That what made me laugh, because it's like, what can't you see? What's wrong with you? Why can't you see? That actually, behind closed doors, and I'd be like, God, why can't I effing see? What is wrong with me? But what I learned this morning, because I had like a little brief therapy appointment this morning, and it's like, I've always had this expectations of big ahas, because in early sobriety, like back in my 20s, I got giant like light bulbs here, light bulbs here. Now that I'm 60, I don't get light bulbs. I just get sort of like, I know it's okay. I know it's going to be okay. So I do like psychoanalyze, like, why was I so attached to having to laugh in order to feel inner peace, in order to feel peace? But that's all part of my process. That's why writing and praying is what I do. But I tend to, like, I'm not Debbie Downer. I'm naturally, laughter is my medicine. I love to laugh, but I also cry a lot. And Tam can attest to that. And it's really healing for me. Yeah, I am the crybaby of the foundation. So it's the same release for me. And I actually think I'm crying less. So I don't know what that's about. We can all try to analyze me, but that's not what we're here to do. We're here to laugh and love and have fun. But yeah, so I'm definitely laughing more. And of course, I have people that make me laugh every day. Oh my God. I mean, the memes that Leon sends me, and Maureen, you just freaking crack me up every day. And Tam, there are no words for how much you crack me up. So my eye goes blind, and then I get this crown in my tooth, and this painful tooth experience. My tooth is still throbbing. And she's like, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And she's like, you've become biblical. And so I am like, whatever. I am not a revenge person, but you know, it's all part of the process.
On yourself. Sometimes you are on yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a beautiful story about an Uncle Mike, and he was called Uncle Mike because strangely his name was Michael, and he was my uncle. But
Tell me more.
yeah, I know, it's fascinating, isn't it? So he was like such a beautiful guy, and like there was things that were missing in my life from my dad, that he kind of occupied this role, and he was an amazing supportive guy. I remember like many years ago getting our first CD out, and excuse me, he came, we went to a place where he was, and I was in the garden playing with the children, hanging out with the dudes, always doing the best things, you know, pretending to be aeroplanes and stuff, when all the grown-ups were indoors talking about what's on the news and stuff. It's like, no thank you. So we'll be outside pretending to be horses running around or whatever it was. And he came bounding out into the garden, and he'd just seen our first CD and opened it and looked at it, and he just couldn't have been happier. He was just so overjoyed that this had happened. He just reflected back at me what was just so beautiful about that energy and that presence in your life. And then he was one of these guys who, like, you know, characteristically, he would like, his keys would always be somewhere. He'd forgotten to do his shoelaces. He wouldn't lock his car. There was a load of stuff about him that became comical, and was just like, oh, Mike, you know. And for a while, that obscured the fact that he was going to disappear from us quite seriously with dementia. It was a really unpleasant experience, because it took too long and it was too short, and there was loads of heartbreak in it. And then this is interesting, because like laughter and forgiveness were just such remedies during this process. And he ended up going to a place which was a bit like you'd see in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was just terrible. And when we went there to see him for the first time, he was walking up and down this corridor, and he was holding my hand like so tight. And he didn't know who he was. He didn't know who anyone else was. There was like 1 tiny % of him left. And he'd walk all the way up to the corridor, try and open the door handle, turn around and walk all the way back down the other end to try and open the door handle. So in his mind, there was this tiny little thought that he didn't want to be here and he wanted to get out. And it was, you know, we were sitting there like, this is the first time we'd seen him like this. And then there was a couple of other patients in the corridor. And one guy was walking down and he was looking on the wall, and there was a fire extinguisher on the wall, and he was pretending to get a tape measure and to assess it and measure it as though he had a clipboard, and it was obviously something from his memory that maybe he used to do professionally. And then another patient came down the corridor, and he had his zipper down, and he had his family jewels on show for everybody to see. And he looked over at this other guy who was like measuring the fire extinguisher, and he went, fucking weirdo. And that just completely and utterly just like filled the space with this great laughter and joy. And also, you know, there was no condemnation for what had just gone on with the guy who was like measuring the fire extinguisher and the guy who had pointed out that he might not be normal.
Mm,
Mhm.
Sweet, Leon.
So, yes, so beautiful. And normal is the thing unto itself. We could get into a whole discussion of what normal is, especially when you become a course student where normal falls off pretty quickly. I have a friend that, you know, I just want to keep repeating that to laugh is not a spiritual override. The true laughter comes spontaneously, and have one of my closest friends has been in the position of being director for the clowns for Cirque du Soleil, and the director of that comedic part. And when I met him, he was like da 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 all the time. And he came to my house, and we both got the flu at the same time. We were supposed to go somewhere else. We were going to go up to Tahoe, and we both got the flu, and we were stuck with 102 fever, both of us, lying on my bed, not able to move. And he said, and I had just met him, you know, for several months earlier, and he said, I can't be funny. And it was so impactful that I lay there and I said, thank God. And the release of having to laugh, to being authentic, made us both laugh. And, you know, that constant watching, when are you pushing it? Like, I have to laugh or I'm not with spirit.
Yes.
You know, it must be there's something wrong, versus that gentle, what comes organically from an awareness of what's ironic. It's not just funny, things are ironic in the spirit world. And it uses every part of you within that. So I just wanted to put that in. We have a question, unless you want to say something about that, in which case.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. Like first of all, there's many levels to this idea of laughter, of humor, of, you know, I mean, even him saying to you, I can't be funny, is funny. Funny, you know, but in regards to like taking things seriously, when we take things seriously, we make them really precious, right? And when we make something really, like when we take A Course in Miracles seriously, we make it really precious. When we take the 10 Commandments seriously, we make them very precious. And then we make that thing vulnerable because we've made it precious, as opposed to just making it, as Jesus said, all things the same. Even in the book, it says, forget this book. I mean, what book says forget this book? I'm freaking funny, you know, and it's like, don't make this precious. Okay. Don't make yourself precious. Don't make the book precious. Like, just see if you can get through it with a modicum of grace and dignity and kindness. So I think that is what makes us real with each other. And when we're real, it's very easy to be funny, because, you know, the real things are what makes us so beautiful.
Yeah, that's great.
It comes spontaneously. It's not a planned, okay, now I'm going to get to the end of the joke. Ha ha ha. It's a spontaneous dance with spirit as we laugh together.
Yes.
I always felt like this material it spoke to me from the moment I saw it, but I never felt qualified because I wasn't a scholar, whatever the F that means. And it's taken me years to say that I'm worthy. I mean, I didn't think I was part of the club but you know, extending love, that I can do. That I can do.
I was too dumb to know I wasn't worthy. I started teaching it before I even finished it. I had no clue. I didn't even know there were other people teaching it. I was just freaking clueless. It's kind of helpful to be so dumb.
Yeah, or to be like so smart you don't want to join that club because you know what it will mean. As you know, as Ken said, which I always loved, when a woman said, oh, I've been doing the course, and he said, you know, how is it for you? And she said, oh, it's fantastic. And he said, well, then you're not doing the course. It's all so funny and also so challenging to the ego, because the ego is so threatened by this. And that's the funniest thing. The ego is threatened by feeling at peace and love. And there is a joke about that. And that will bring me to this question, one of the questions from the chat that says, can we speak to the happy dream in relationship to laughter? So I I would like to just say very quickly that I've just moved our foundation office to a houseboat, and a houseboat in Sausalito. And the boat, I had a dream about this right after my mother passed, that we would do this. And the staff has been kind of joking with me for 2 years, almost 2 years, saying, you know, when are we going to be on your dream boat? And I found the boat found me. I didn't know until I contracted to rent it that it was, the name of the boat was Dream. And I thought, that's funny. If ever I get this boat, I'm gonna have to change it to Happy Dream, because dream we're not necessarily awakened from. And the happy dream is when, this is my take on it, when we can laugh continuously about the dream that we see ourselves in. It doesn't mean you get out of the dream. It means your attachment, your non-attachment to it, allows you to see the humor and irony in everyone, including your own choices. You get to see that people who are passionate to save the world because something in them needs saving. You get to see that everything reflects back onto our own projections. And that's the laughter of the happy dream, I believe, which is the true irony of our attachment to the dream itself. And let me hear what you guys have to say about it.
Yeah, I think the happy dream is the one and I know this is going to sound kind of weird, but I think it really is the one in which we're truly helpful. You know what I mean? I mean, that's what really makes us feel happy. Doing esteemable acts builds self-esteem. And for most of us who come to the course or the 12-step or whatever program we come to it trying to fill in a gap that's not there. You know, and so once we realize, oh, I'm very holy, and then I wake up to this happy dream, then we just, everything, we're almost like the flower that has the scent that leaves it without having to think about it, the sun that has the light that leaves it without having to think about it. Like you just get to be who you organically are without all of that thought. I think the thoughts are the things where we take it seriously and we make this separate dream. But when we get to be present in this space, it becomes very delightful, very joyful, you know, even as the whole world starts to like fall apart and crumble, you know, I still get to know in my shoes, there's joy, no matter what, you know, and I will face my own dragons and demons and I will, you know, tame them within myself. But, you know, I cannot change the whole world if I don't change myself, if I don't wake up myself. So waking up is a joyful thing.
And the ego will always try to drive us into guilt about everything. And Maureen, you keep bringing up the word joy. And when you did your presentation for this, just to announce it, you brought up joy. I put the web edition in the chat. Tam brought up the web edition earlier. The web edition is a great way to research words. And the word joy, it comes up 396 times in the course. And the word laugh, 24, the word laughter, 18 times, but there's a reason why joy comes up. That's what we're being asked, to live this happy dream and joy. And that doesn't mean that we don't have bad days. It just means that we are, or neglecting what's happening out in the world. Like, you know, my Maui, I love Maui. Maui is my place. And, you know, it's burned, but that doesn't mean that I can't have joyful prayer for the people that are suffering and love them and love it and trust that it's going to be okay.
You know, I wanted to just jump in here because a lot of times it's not just sadness looking back, but also we're either living in the memory of the past or the imagination of the future, like where we, you know, this is going to be bad. It's, you know, but one of the things that the course has made, well, I don't know. Here's my point. Get to the point, Jodi. Here's the point. If you don't know what's going to happen, if you're looking at a situation, you're like, oh man, why not assume the very best for yourself? Because energetically, you're putting it out there anyway, and what you put out, you get back in. So what would the harm be of just seeing everything working out, perfection? Yeah. And if you don't know, and energy is the law of attraction, you might as well put it out there that it's going to work out perfectly.
Yep, absolutely.
Form follows consciousness, baby.
Which does get me to this question that makes me laugh. And I don't mean to offend whoever wrote it, but it is, what happens when you die? So I'm sorry. My mother was very curious about that when she was in the, researching consciousness. And she asked the wisest person who she felt she knew at that point, who was deep into studying after death experiences, and all sorts of things. And he looked at her and he said, whatever you think. And she just thought that was the most incredible answer. And when she was going and I was holding her in my arms, she was, again, had moments of screaming in tremendous pain. And I've shared this at other times, but I'm going to share it now. My own immediate reaction, my visceral reaction was, oh, Mom, I'm sorry you're in pain, like holding her extra tight and squeezing her as she's screaming. And she felt that. And she looked at me and she basically said, she didn't say the word stop it. She said, you don't need to do that. And I said, what? And she said, my body knows it's my time. I'd stay here forever to be with you. But my body is doing its job to kick me out because it is my time. Don't be mad at it for giving me the pain to move on and to release from the weight of this. And she shifted me so quickly, whereas the next time she screamed, I was like, way to go. And I was cheering her like a pregnant woman who was screaming for birth. And it flipped it so much. It was like, way to go, body. And I started kissing her, thanking her body for allowing her to be here for 90 years without her taking very good care of it, besides which, and the hits that this body took for her so she could do the work here. And it became such a sacred, totally blissful moment that when she was screaming, I started to laugh and she looked at me and she said, my body is doing its job, but I have never been so peaceful in my life. And the next step of that was I started to say, well, Mom, you're going to be seeing, like her story was, I'm going to meet up with my mother, my grandmother, and Whit, my husband. And so I started to give her that story. And I had been reading her the course, and the section of Forget This Course, all of it. And she looked at me and I said, Mom, you're going to be able to see Grandma and you're going to see Whit soon. And she said, oh, it's different than I thought. And I said, what? And she said, it doesn't mean that's not going to happen, but it's different than I thought. And I said, how so? And she said, it's just love, no story. And so I don't know what happens when you die. I didn't die yet, and I don't remember dying other times, although when I was a child, apparently I did. But what do you want to happen when you die? How do you want to experience that experience? And the Course teaches us, if you ground in love, I got to see someone die who was so amazingly conscious in love. She evanesced. I've held a lot of people who died, and some just went through spirit. My mom evanesced into love, and to this day, I haven't been able to cry for her because every time I see love around me, there's my mother. So that's my answer.
And that's what I see in you, Tam. That's what I see in you. I just had to say that, Maureen.
It's such a beautiful story, first of all, how you midwifed your mom. God bless you. Thanks for sharing that. It's just a gorgeous story. And yeah, it's a funny question too, because, we've been inundated with people who have died and come back, and every single one of them has written a bestseller. How awesome it is. So I think we can kind of trust that it's not a bad gig after this one. But what I would say to that question too is that, because that question is another way of escaping this moment. Don't play in the realm of the dead when you're alive. You're alive. So don't worry about the dead. It's guaranteed. It's going to happen. You know what I mean? And we'll all trip the light fantastic. But right now, I just know for myself that that our role is to be in life and to experience this very ephemeral experience.
Yes.
And there is, there's so many different forms of passing, so many different, from people who are so scared and violently angry, or people who are medicated, or people who, like my mom, she just, as they say, she saw it through a different conscious lens. So I think it is, as you said, like be here now, even through a passage.
Yeah. And I think people make up all kinds of stories about how people end and why Jack took his life and why other people, it's like, who knows? Really, who knows?
Yeah.
But how, I think it's just the ego just making up whatever. Be here now.
Well, I'm oh, sorry.
Of course, says I trust my brother who's one with me. And so in this lifetime, I committed suicide. That's what I did. I am that I am. And that was probably the least painful thing that I could do in the moment with the circumstances. But I trust that my brother did what was most helpful to his spiritual evolution. End of story. For me, that's for me. It's not to say it's not sad or devastating when somebody chooses that, but it's also, God has given us choice and we're allowed to choose everything. Without any condemnation. That's
Jodi, were you going to say something?
Well, I just, when you talk to me, I have, you're in my wheelhouse because I have a total near-death thing going on. Because they say that if you die and come back, most people have extra powers. Woo! But they often say that people, their soul leaves their body before they even die. So when you hear screaming, that they're already in the upper room at that point, and that a lot of times when people are getting in an accident or something, like the people who go through the near-death thing see, their soul pops out of their body and they're looking third person dispassionately over this body, like, oh, look at that. And one more thing. This is my jam. You know how we all get all crazy when we're like, oh, look at my hair, it looks dumb. I feel like this makes me look pudgy. Like you don't like your appearance. But after you die, they say that you shed your body like an old coat that you just throw on the ground. You don't care.
Or a tight shoe.
At all. Huh? Or a
shoe.
A
pair of drawers, whatever. It's like, oh, look at that. And when we think about all the times in our lives that we have looked at ourselves in the mirror and not liked this, when at the end of the day, bye-bye. These wings will make me look chubby,
And all of this is still in the speculation of the world of form. And the course is not about the world of form. What happens when we die, if we're still thinking, if we're still doing that number, we still need to do the course. We still need to let go and realize it doesn't mean because we're dead that we don't have thoughts of form. I don't know the answer. I just know what's your commitment to now to bring you through wherever, as Maureen said, wherever the next moment is. What's the commitment that you have as a course student, particularly, to the next step in that? And it's what will carry us through all of this. And I don't think we need to concern what happens next. As you say, it's a guaranteed thing in the world of form, but how do you want to navigate it when you through fear?
No one gets out alive.
Exactly. Or we do, but not in the way we think.
Right. Amen.
And we don't even know, is reincarnation real? Do we suddenly get another body, brand new? Let's start again. It really is not that important in the world of the course. What matters is doing the practice and seeing the world differently and seeing that we are one, so that all of it is a dream, and all of it then becomes the happy dream. If you go and you transition and there's another body, okay, you're still in a place of non-attachment to form. Forget this course and walk with Jesus, spirit, love. And that's the thing that moves all of us and moves all of this through. So, you know, there is the choice. We are coming to an end for all of this now, which is another form of death. How are you going to deal with that, guys? Like, you know, I'll miss this conversation. It was a lot of fun. But I just want to see if anyone has any last things they would like to say. We're closing up in just a few minutes left. And would anyone like to say something that they haven't got to say?
One thing I would say, which I think is great, is that all healing is mutual and laughter is healing. And so when people are laughing, it's contagious. And you ever notice how contagious it is when people are laughing? And I have this son who's on the autism spectrum. And when we're laughing in the living room, he'll come in and I'll be like, what's going on? I want to get in on this laugh. I think it's so cute. So it's like and it is just like trust. It's something you can develop. Like you can go and decide, I'm going to be a better laugher. I'm going to take less things seriously. I'm going to infuse my life with more joy. You can decide for that with the Holy Spirit. And that's all I wanted to add.
And I just want to acknowledge Tam for running this foundation with a premise of fun. If we're not having fun, it's not worth it. And that is how she leads this organization. And it makes my heart sing every day. I mean, Maureen, you talked about loving your job. I love my job because the foundation is fun. It's the FF. And it's lots of fun.
This webinar was Laura's idea. It was supposed to be her birthday webinar. So we really, really thank her for that one. And in all of this, that was my deal with Holy Spirit. I will do this job if it's fun. It doesn't mean it's fun every second. It means that I remember the things that aren't fun. Why? Why aren't they fun? What's going on? What's my resistance? And that's where we go.
That's the perceptionism here. That's when I have to look at myself and it's like, I'm choosing this suffering right now because no one's enforcing it. But we work hard and we have fun. And when Laura chooses to suffer, it's because of my own stuff. It's certainly not the foundation that this is built on.
And it is kind of awful in a certain way, because when Laura chooses to suffer, she does it so funny that the rest of and we get her laughing at herself because we reflect how dramatic it all becomes, and she's crying and then she's laughing, and it's not really at her. It's truly with her ebullient personality that sometimes is overblown, and it's part of all of it. And we connect because we each can be that. I'm not the most subtle person this one. So
I would say be of good cheer. And if you're going to have a shift in perception, make sure you put enough emphasis on pronouncing the F in shift.
yeah, perfect. And I will say, because the thought about like superpowers, I heard last night a person told me, and I will do this quickly, a person told me that the first time she ever heard of the therapist, she was like blown away, and she said, what do you do? And this person said, the psychologist said, I do supervision, mostly supervision. She's like, you have supervision? Wow. And he said, no, I do supervision. I supervise people. And she was so disappointed. And, you know, we were laughing, saying she should have asked, well, do you have any other superpowers you bring to your supervision? So I hope that we all connect with our own supervision, and we supervise ourselves to remember to laugh and to be in this with joy. And I would love to end this with a quote from the Course. It says, the world will end in laughter because it is a place of tears.
Yeah.
So laugh till you cry, everyone.
Mic drop.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for putting this together. It's awesome. It's wonderful. Great topic. Very needed.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Tam. Thanks, everyone. We thank our guests for this discussion and for our attendees for joining us, as well as our team, the foundation, staff, and volunteers. We, of course, want to give our appreciation for all those who donate to the Let's Discuss webinar series. It's your donations that keep these events coming. So thanks so much. Before we go, we just have a few announcements, including news about 2 webinars we'll be holding next month. If you are here with us live, keep an eye on the group chat and we'll be posting the information there. We want to make sure you know about our weekly Miracle Voices podcast, co-hosted by Matt McCabe and Tam Morgan. Here, students share reflections on how A Course in Miracles shifted their outlook and fostered healing through forgiveness. In fact, today's guest panelist, Leon Russell, was a recent guest on Miracles Voices, episode 95, called Let Happy Dreams Replace Fearful Dreams. So you can make sure you check it out at miraclevoices.org. The web edition. So are you one of the 40,000 students to use the Course in Miracles web edition every month? For the last 2 years, course students from around the world have been able to search the entire course, access the daily book lessons with one click, and even listen to the workbook audio with the Foundation for Inner Peace's complete online publication of A Course in Miracles. If you haven't used it yet, check it out at acourseinmiracles.org/ACIM. Also, donating to the web edition will help us keep it going, and we'll be able to translate it into different languages. All right, next month, you'll want to stay tuned for September. Foundation for Inner Peace offers not just 1, but 2 Let's Discuss web events. Early in the month, we will feature ACIM Encore Replay, a much loved webinar entitled From Specialness to Holiness. And then later in the month, we will hold a second event from the Role of Teacher series with guest A Course in Miracles teacher, Carol Howe. So we hope you will join us. If you subscribe to our foundation announcements and newsletters, you will be emailed soon. Additionally, you can always check out our website's event page at acim.org/events. We've created a short survey that will display on your browser when the session ends. So please give us feedback for today's session. And with love and gratitude, thank you so much for being here. And we look forward to having you next time. Thanks again.